And welcome to another episode of the Bandit Room. My name is Charles. I'm joined here in the studio today by Mr. Caleb.
Hello.
Across the table from me is Mr. Aggie.
What's up?
Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
I say welcome back. Welcome back to everybody. We've taken a little hiatus for a minute.
Is that what it was?
A little summer hiatus.
I just thought you guys were not working hard.
Yeah.
I know Killer went to like a bunch of movies when I was gone.
Yeah, it is movie season right now.
That's right.
Yeah. A lot of movies.
Have you caught any of it?
No.
No.
No. The last one was Top Gun.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything
I'm
after
about
that.
just as bad. I did catch Oppenheimer, though. Have you seen both the Barbenheimer experience?
Yep, I did.
Yep.
I did.
You went all the way to Atlanta to experience it.
Yeah, for the 70 millimeter IMAX for Oppenheimer.
Was it worth it?
Yes.
It's worth the
That's very
travel?
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's still out there?
Yeah, I think it is.
We'll fly down there.
Yeah, you might have to check.
I got my plane back today from my annual, so we'll just make a trip.
Nice.
Nice. And of course, our guest today is meteorologist Brad Panovich with WCNC here in Charlotte. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. Now, you are here. You were a friend of a previous guest. We had Larry Sprinkle on a few episodes back, and we was like, hey, you know what? Let's get this other weather team here from WCNC. So we're glad to have you.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah. We are recording currently in the dog days of summer.
Yeah.
Are you loving it? Do you love the summer?
I hate it. I'm a fall person.
Yeah.
I like the warm, mild days and the cool nights.
Mm-hmm.
I just where you don't need AC or heat. It's like the perfect. It's like your window is your thermostat.
Yeah.
Like how far up or down
that's
do you want?
perfect. Yeah.
So that's the kind of year. But I do like summer in general. It's just the humidity just gets out of control, and I don't like walking out at like 10 o'clock at night and feeling like it's a sauna outside. That's no fun to me.
Right. I totally agree. Do you think this is going to be a record-setting year for heat?
Not in the Carolinas. We've had a pretty cool start to the summer, so it's hard for us to kind of go the other extreme. We had such a cool June, which was like refreshing. July was way hot. I mean, about a degree and a half above normal, but it kind of canceled out the coolness. So we're right back to like even for the summer. So even if we have a little bit above average August or near average, it'll probably be pretty tame. Now, nowhere near like the rest of the country, the southern part of the country from the desert Southwest, Texas and Florida, just a brutal summer all the way across.
Now, how did you get into doing weather? Let's walk through a little bit of your background.
So I have a really interesting story because like I wanted to be a meteorologist since I was 6.
Is that right?
So I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and we had a blizzard when I was 6. And it was like 3 or 4 blizzards in a row, but it was this third blizzard in particular. They called it the blizzard of 78. And it's
giving away your age there.
Yeah, everyone can figure it out. So so I grew up there. We had those split level houses, where like the basement and the garage are kind of like half underground. So our driveway sloped down. And we had the station wagon. And so when we got a big snowstorm with wind, the whole driveway in the car would get like drifted over. And our front door got drifted over. And so we couldn't open the front door because the snow was so deep. My dad had to climb out the window to shovel out the screen door because, our one door opened in, the interior door, but the screen door opened out and we couldn't open it. And so he dug it out, and I went out there in my snowsuit, and I saw these 6-foot snow drifts, and I was like, I want to know how, what, and why this happens. And so I was utterly fascinated with bad weather. And so every time we had severe thunderstorms, flooding, especially winter storms, I would stay up all night just staring at the sky, waiting to see how much coverage the road would have, whether we'd have school or not. And so I was just fascinated with weather in general. And so every book report, science fair project I could ever remember as a kid was on weather. Now, at the time, I didn't want to be on TV because growing up in the 80s, early 90s, most of your TV weather people weren't meteorologists. They were like, the failed news anchor that they stuck over in the weather office and said, hey, read the weather. They weren't trained meteorologists. They were TV presenters doing the weather. So to me, that was like, that's not what I want to do. I want to be a scientist. So I really thought I'd go work for NOAA, the National Weather Service. I'd be, working for the government, or I'd chase storms, which was like my pipe dream forever. But you can't make any money doing that. Or, I would go back to school and be a professor or something. So when I got the chance to go to college, I picked 3 schools, offered their meteorology program. Penn State was my #1 choice. It's a very large meteorology school. St. Louis University in St. Louis, and then Ohio State, which was the only state school in Ohio where I grew up that had a meteorology program. So those are my three choices. Well, the first two got whittled out pretty quickly because of cost.
Gotcha.
In-state tuition was a bargain.
Yeah.
And so I went to Ohio State, this huge university, 60,000 students at the time when I'm there. Our program had 12 people in it, 12 undergraduates in meteorology. And I just fell in love with the campus and the lifestyle, ended up playing soccer there, walked on the soccer team, and just had a great college experience. Graduated my degree in atmospheric science, a minor in climatology, no journalism, no broadcasting, nothing. Get ready to graduate. Government has a hiring freeze in the Weather Service because they had a budget impasse in Congress. This happens from time to time. The first thing is like, guess what? We're not hiring anybody. So I start saying, oh crap, what am I going to do?
Right.
My buddy says, do an internship at a TV station. I'm like, nope, those people are phony. They don't know what they're doing. And eventually I gave in, walk into the CBS affiliate in Columbus, Ohio for my internship. And they had a Doppler radar. They had all these silicon graphics machines, which I was a really big tech geek too. I love technology. And I knew a lot about the graphics and hardware system. And I was like, this is cool. So I started building a lot of graphics for them, all these 3D graphics. And at one point in my internship, the news director came out to the weather office, was like, hey, who's building all these graphics? These are awesome. And the chief meteorologist, like, our intern Brad is, because they didn't know how to use any of this equipment. And she's like, do you want a job? And I said, doing what? We want you to be a weather producer. And I didn't know what that was. She said, we basically want you to do the forecast, build the graphics, do everything but present it in front of the camera. So I finished up school doing that, and it really kind of gave me some experience about like the TV broadcast thing was about. And so I graduated, and I had my resume online, and a TV station in Dayton, Ohio reached out to me and said, hey, we'd love to interview you for a morning meteorologist position. I said, sure, here's my resume, everything. And they tell me my first learning experience in broadcasting was, we need a resume reel. I was like, what's that? We need you to send a copy or a video of you doing the weather, like an audition.
Yeah.
So that night I had one horribly fitting sport coat, and as a college senior, barely fits me. It looked horrible. Probably bought it at like Kohl's or something. Yeah. And I go in that night after my shift as a weather producer, and after the 6 o'clock news, and they let me record in front of the key wall and practice, and I did a whole bunch of takes, and I sent it off to them, and they gave me a job. And it was only part-time because they only had Today's Show cut-ins, a 30-minute morning show, and then I was done for the day.
Gotcha.
And I actually, believe it or not, for 9 months I worked in TV in the morning, and I worked at Dick's Sporting Goods in the afternoon. So I did that, but the cool thing was I got to learn about TV on the job, and I didn't have a contract, so I really wasn't tied down to this station. And so that's when I started really enjoying the broadcast part, because the cool thing about it was I loved weather, I loved science, and the broadcast field was an outlet to share it with other people that I probably wouldn't have had if I was sitting in a cubicle or at the Weather Service office just typing out forecasts and not communicating with the public. Yeah. So I really started falling in love with it, and I ended up getting another job offer in Traverse City, Michigan to be a chief meteorologist at a Fox station. And went up there, I was their first on-air person. They just started, this is when the Fox affiliates started doing news. The network was forcing them all to be local news providers as well as a national network. Gotcha. And so I was their first hire. It was a smaller market, but I was the chief. Got to hire my staff, pick out the equipment, and loved it up there. I thought I'd be there 3 years, was there a year, and our station manager says, we're selling the station. Oh. Well, I knew enough about broadcasting at this point. When things get sold, you start looking for other things to do. So I called a couple of my networking options that I had and said, hey, my station's being sold. I don't know what that's going to mean for me. I just want to keep my options open. And New Orleans, Louisiana called and said, hey, we'd love to have you come down and do an interview. I said, well, at the very least, I get a free trip to New Orleans. I get to go to because the station was in the French Quarter, which was like the coolest thing ever. Right. And so I flew down there, not thinking in a million years I'd be working in New Orleans, and they pretty much offered me the job on the spot. And it was a huge pay increase, and I thought, man, this is not really where I want to be because I like 4-season climates. But it was the #1 CBS affiliate. It was an awesome powerhouse station. I said, this would be a good career move if I do want to move back to like Ohio or make it to the Weather Channel or somewhere like that. And so I moved down there and ended up staying 4 years and got to fly into hurricanes, got to cover hurricanes. I was one of the first meteorologists they had that actually went out in the field. They always sent reporters out.
Oh.
And so when I went down there, I said, hey, send me to cover the hurricanes.
Right.
And they're like, we don't do that. We only send reporters. And I did it. And they're like, wow, you're pretty good at this. So let's do this again. So because the thing was about, I always thought it was weird. They sent news people to cover weather events because the news people have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They're just regurgitating what they heard somewhere else or what someone told them. As a meteorologist, when you're out in the field, you know what's happening, so it's easier for you to talk about what's going on. So that was natural for me, and it just kind of clicked. And so I ended up chasing hurricanes and working weekends down there. And after a while, I got really tired of living in New Orleans. Now, don't get me wrong, New Orleans is an amazing city.
Right.
Best people I've ever been around. It's one of those places I always tell people, it's a great place to visit. It's not a great place to live.
Oh, yeah.
So I also missed 4-season climate.
Yeah.
There's only 2 seasons in New Orleans. Summer and hurricane season. And, I just told you how I don't like summer.
Right.
And you think it's hot and humid here.
Yeah.
I would go do the morning show in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
2:30 in the morning. It's like 90 degrees outside.
Wow. Yeah.
It is, and it was hot at Easter. It was hot on Halloween. It was just like, it never ended. So I knew I wanted to get back, maybe not to Ohio, not that far north, but somewhere where there was some winter, some fall, a spring. And I'd always loved the Carolinas. We had a sister station here in Charlotte. And right away I said, that's where I want to go. And so I applied, got the job, and moved up here. And it just kind of, that was it. It was like, it felt like home within the first week of moving here.
Nice.
And just fell in love with the area, the climate, the city, the people. And now I've been here 20 years. Never thought once about leaving.
That's awesome, man. But you just did what everyone from Ohio is doing.
I took the long way.
Long way to get here.
So where in Northeast Ohio are you from?
Akron.
Oh, really?
So Akron, Ohio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
My
Small
wife's
world.
from Akron.
Oh, yeah.
We have an office in Akron.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the Firestone building. Yeah, I mean, I'm flying back there on Friday.
You still have
Saturday.
family up there?
Yeah, all my family's still up there. We lived on the west side, a little town called Copley.
Yeah, that's what Jim lives.
Funny. That's so funny.
So
One
that's
of our business development guy who's from our Ohio office. He lives in Copley.
Yep. Yeah, my brother's up there. My mom, who just passed, but she was living up there. My dad, and then my younger brother. They all stayed in that area, and so I still go up and visit them. But I don't miss the winters up there. Not because of the snow and cold. I always tell people that's not the problem living on the. It's the lack of sunshine.
Yeah, that is true.
You don't see the sun for 4 months.
Yeah.
So I love cold and snow. I love skiing and all that. But the problem is it's never sunny in the winter up there.
Right.
That's what gets on you, not the cold and the snow.
Yeah. So you've been in Charlotte for 20 years. Do I have this right that you went back to New Orleans during Katrina?
Yeah, so it was a weird story. Probably the most eventful weather event I ever covered in my life. I had been here, so I moved here basically December 2002, but I didn't start on air till January 2003.
Gotcha.
And so I was 2003, so obviously Katrina hits in 2005. So this is about 2 years into my stint in Charlotte. As I mentioned, our stations are owned by the same company. And so I'm obviously 2 years removed. I'm still friends with everyone at the old station. I actually knew the guy who replaced me because he moved from Eastern North Carolina to go take the job in New Orleans. But he was from Cincinnati, Ohio. So it was we had all these weird connections, And knowing what I know about New Orleans, I could see when Katrina was forming over Florida that this was probably going to be bad news for New Orleans. So I reached out to them and said, hey, guys, I know this looks pretty bad. Let me know if I can help you remotely. If you want me to update the website, do anything I can, build graphics for you on my end, we'll FTP them down there. So their news director reached out to my news director and said, yes, let's fly Brad down here right now to help out. So between the 6 and 11 o'clock news on like a Saturday night, I got on a plane and flew to New Orleans with one carry-on piece of luggage. And I got up Sunday morning, started broadcasting. Sunday night, we get evacuated to the Hyatt Regency Superdome, and then Monday morning, the storm hits, and I ride the thing out in the Hyatt Regency Superdome. And then I end up staying 2 weeks covering the storm by traveling back and forth from LSU, Baton Rouge. And I stayed in a different place every night. Yeah. And all of this with like one change of clothes. And but it was crazy. There's a lot of things I can tell about Katrina. It's the stuff you see, you smell. It was it was a wild experience.
Would you say that was probably the most extreme storm you've covered?
By far. And probably, like I said, the most impactful to me personally because, you know, when I say I love weather, you cover it. You don't always personalize it as much.
Right.
But Katrina was the first time that every single person I was working with was affected by it. You know, what happens is a TV station, half of us stayed in New Orleans, the other half went to Baton Rouge. We kind of have two backup facilities. But everybody who's there, their families have evacuated. So they're by themselves. And so that 2 weeks of seeing the devastation, and everybody you know that you work with, their family's not there, so they're separated from their immediate family, and at the same time they know their house is completely destroyed. Yeah. So it was emotionally, it was really a struggle every day. Yeah. People poured their heart and soul into work to try to avoid the reality, but every day somebody would finally realize and break down and like, hey, I know I've lost everything. And a couple times during that, I went and helped people clear their house out from flood damage, and it was just horrible. So to see that and see the personal toll it took on people I knew, it was like the first time where I'm like, you know what? I do not like hurricanes. I don't. And after that year, I was like, I could probably go my rest of my career and not cover another hurricane because of the devastation I saw.
I was there about 10 months after the hurricane hit, and it was still so bad, man.
Well, I went back 2 years later, and it still
it was bad. It does. You're right. It definitely affects you. You see, and having been to that city so many times. And then you go back. It was mind blowing. It was, you know.
Well, and the one thing I'll tell you about people in New Orleans, they love that city. It is like, people say it's like going to another country, but it is like going to another country. The culture is so different. People from there, they love it. They move away. They always move back. You just felt for the people that got infected. And then when I moved up here, it was amazing, a number of New Orleanians that moved up here after Katrina that basically just got out of Dodge. And so I would get emails all the time like, hey, we just moved here because we evacuated. It's nice to see a friendly face, someone they knew from their days down in New Orleans. So, and I still know people like that today that, you know, will run into me and like, they still feel like it's yesterday. It was like, but it's been, you know, it's 2005. It's been forever. It's 15 years ago.
Wow. It's been 15 years?
Almost, yeah.
Wow. So talking about that and switching stories, since you're from Ohio, you think the Browns are going to the Super Bowl again this year? Again.
Oh, man. So I will always be a Browns fan just because that's where I'm from. But I told myself I'm not putting my kids through that misery. So I keep that penance to myself. But I feel like every year we're going.
I know.
But it's almost to the point now where I just accept that like they're going to let me down. That's part of being a Cleveland sports fan.
Hey, we're getting used to that here in Charlotte as well.
Build you up. But Cleveland's got an art form to it. They build you up. It's like, can you just let us down easy? Nope, we're going to get you right there, and then we're going to rip your soul out. I don't know how many times the Guardians or the Indians, how many times the World Series when we played the Cubs, I thought for sure we win that. And then the rain delay hits. And we lose. And then the Browns a million times. That's why the Cavs winning the championship in 2016 was like, I was at the beach and I was with my in-laws and I went nuts. And I remember my mother-in-law was like, I didn't realize you liked basketball this much. I'm like, you don't realize what a big deal is. Cleveland won a championship and something. They just did not get it. I said, I was almost in tears, the fact that we had won a championship and something.
I remember watching that game. I'm not a big basketball fan, but I watched with Carrie and you know, her mother. Everybody's on the phone and going crazy. So James, who's from Copley, he's from our Ohio office. Every year, right after draft, you know, we are going to the Super Bowl. And I always tell him, dude, you guys have so many first rounders.
Oh, yeah.
Your entire team is made out of first rounders.
Well, that's a frustrating thing. Like, on paper, that is the most talented team they've ever had. But they will not win anything if that. That's how they do it to you.
So this is what it has come down to this year. He has already booked an Airbnb in Vegas.
See, he's jinxing it for us. That's what he's doing.
He said, we're going to the Super Bowl, and he's already booked the house. I said, listen, if the Browns are going to the Super Bowl, I'll buy the tickets. Since you booked the house.
Yeah.
But if not, you are in big trouble, my friend.
Hope you enjoy the game.
And I have a very good chance of winning that bet right now.
Yeah. But the thing is, since I've been here, I've been such a huge Panthers fan. Like, it's, to me, I love the Panthers more, I think, than people from here because I appreciate the success and the stability of the franchise. As many warts and issues as the Panthers have had, I would trade franchises in a heartbeat. The fact that in my time here, we've gone to 2 Super Bowls,
right,
is amazing
to
me. And I think people in this area take it for granted how successful this team has been, because there's teams like us, the Browns.
Yeah.
We've been around since the early days, and we've never sniffed a Super Bowl.
We moved here, my wife moved here in 2006. I started watching Panthers in like 2006-7 season. And so 2015 is when we got season tickets. And I go there, and the people around me are like, from day one, they've been, season ticket holders. And every game I went to, we were winning, like every game, like nonstop. And then they go, Aggie, this is not how it works, my friend. Not every game you leave the stadium happy and cheering and excited. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. And we're like, well, it's happening. And then
the lucky charm for a while.
And then we lost that one game against the Falcons, but that was just like throwaway, whatever.
Yeah.
But then 2 seasons later, then I finally experienced a losing home game. I was like, I can't believe this. This is horrible. And this urologist who sits in front of me, he goes, Aggie, I told you, it sucks, man, when you leave here and you just have one losing game after the other. So.
But they're easy to root for, and they have the tailgating's great for the Panthers games. That's the first thing, as somebody who's a lifelong football fan, the first thing I recognized I got here, it's like they know how to tailgate here. They do it right. The pre-games are really good here. So it's easy to root for the team though, and Panthers are, I've kind of given up on the Browns for so many years. And like it was just like I'm gonna adopt, and then my kids are Panthers fans, so it's easy as a family for us just to adopt and root for the Panthers. But I do. The Panthers and Browns play each other like last year. That was a tough game. Part of me was like, I wanted the Browns to win, but I'm like, who needs this game more? Probably the Panthers and Matt Rule at the time. And the fact that they lost, I'm like, well, that's it. Matt Rule's done.
So which team do you hate the most? The Ravens or the Steelers or the Bengals?
Ooh. Well, growing up as a Cleveland fan, you gotta hate the Steelers,
right?
And the thing was, that's always been our biggest rival. Now the Ravens are always going to have that deep-seated. They're former Browns, but you hated them because of who their owner was and who moved the team. But after Art Modell passed, rest in peace. I think that kind of like that put it to bed. Like the Ravens, okay, it's over. We got our own team. But the Steelers are still up there. And the thing I didn't realize about the Cleveland-Pittsburgh thing, I thought it was just a football thing until I visited Pittsburgh. And you go there, and there's signs and shirts about like how there's interstate signs that say like 80 miles of stupidity. It's like to like Cleveland or whatever. And I'm like, they actually hate the city of Cleveland. It's not a football thing. They make fun of Cleveland. And the funny thing is, the two cities, the people are like the same kind of people. I think that's why they're such a good rivalry, because they literally are the same kind of blue collar, steel, Rust Belt kind of towns. The populations could not be more similar, and they hate each other. And I think it's like a family rivalry, kind of thing.
So my business partner's son, he goes to University of Pittsburgh, so I was going to visit him, and James, he said, it's only an hour and a half from Copley, so he said, I'll drive up there. We meet up in a hotel parking lot, and before we go in, he goes, hold on. I said, what are you doing? He's like, let me just spit out this.
Oh yeah,
it's like the Hatfields and McCoys.
When I lived in Michigan, and I'd have to drive back between Traverse City and every time I drove by Ann Arbor, I spit out the window because of our rivalry with Michigan. So I know exactly why he did that.
So in the airline industry, I'm a pilot. I fly, but not commercially. On my own, with some passengers. People are like. Most airline industry, like when they get into an airline, they never leave because everything is based on seniority. In your line of work, is that the same?
Not really. I've been lucky. Like for someone to stay somewhere 20 years is kind of rare. Because what a lot of people do, and maybe it's because I didn't want to get into TV, people end up moving around a lot because they're trying to get to like this ideal market. Like everybody wants to be in a big media market. And I never wanted to do that, first of all, because the big media markets are like New York, LA, Chicago. To answer your question, most people move around quite a bit because we're on contracts. We all have employee contracts, so they're 2 or 3 year deals. Every 2 or 3 years, you're kind of exploring your options. And so because of that, people tend to move around a lot. For me, this is where I wanted to live. So it was a no-brainer. Like people always like, you're going to leave or have opportunities. I've had opportunities, but I'm not leaving where I want to live, just for a job. I always say you want to live where you live first, and then worry about the work thing later.
Right.
Makes sense.
So have you ever lost a bet? Do you guys like bet with people? Like, it's got 2 o'clock, it's going to rain where you live.
Yeah.
I'll put $50 on it. And if it doesn't, have you made any money like that?
I have not made any money, but I have impressed a lot of people. My kids being number one. I remember my kids really don't understand what I did until the first time I told them it was going to rain, and they woke up and it was sunny, and they're like, "Dad, what are you talking about? It's sunny right now. It's going to rain by this afternoon." And when it rained, my daughter thought I was a wizard. She was like, "Dad, how did you know that?" I'm like, "Well, because I knew it was going to come this afternoon." And so stuff like that, I think, is what I've done. But gambling, there is money to be made in weather, though, forecasting. It's funny. People think, the TV people make all the money. You know where the most money in meteorology is? Commodities trading. There's meteorologists that work on 3, 6, 9 month forecasts for commodities and energy futures and farm futures. That's where the money is. Huge commission, and those forecasts are more climate forecasts. And so if you can forecast a cold winter and have someone buy natural gas futures low or buy energy futures low and then sell them high in the winter, that's where you get commission on that for your forecast. So
gotcha.
Those meteorologists, those commodities guys, make a ton of money.
Was that on your radar?
I looked at a job one time at Columbus like that. It was for the energy company, actually. And part of it was being the meteorologist for the power company and helping their commodities traders buy and sell natural gas and electricity.
Gotcha.
So that's really, if you want money, that's kind of where the money is in our business.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, you said you're married now with kids.
Yep.
When you were in the world of dating, saying I'm a weather guy, did that impress anyone?
I don't know if it impressed anybody, but people definitely knew you were on TV. But that was the hard part about finding a girl that was taking you seriously. Like, are you interested in me because you're interested in me, or because you're the guy on TV? And I remember that was the one selling point for my wife. I met her on a blind date.
Yeah.
And she had no idea who I was. And I'm like, all right, I love you already. It was because she got to know me as me first and not the TV weather guy.
Clean slate.
Yeah, but I did date girls that were like that. Like, they thought it was cool. But the funniest part about what I do is that a lot of people recognize me, but they don't know from where. And so I'll get a lot of and you don't want to be like one of those egotistical guys like, oh yeah, I work on TV, that's why. No, I'm like, so I just oh, I don't know, where do you know me from? And they'll be like, are you the UPS guy, or do you go to church with me? And I have to sit there and go, oh no, I work in broadcast. Oh, you're the weather guy. And usually they hear my voice, they know. They'll recognize the face, and then as soon as they hear me speak, they'll know exactly who I am.
That's
so
funny. But probably because people aren't watching television as religiously as we used to in the past. So people really knew their anchors back in the day. No,
they just know it's a familiar face, or
it's like you're a name and a face that people have seen throughout their day.
I always say need 3 pieces of information to confirm. They kind of recognize me. If I'm at somewhere I have to show an ID or have a credit card, they'll see the name and they'll go, oh, okay. Then they'll figure it out. But my wife hates it because people, when we go out, they're like, pss, 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 and she'd be like, just come over and say something. Quit whispering. I'm like, they're like, we're normal people. Just come say hi. It's not a big deal,
One of the funniest things Larry told us when he was here is we were talking about what's it like going around Charlotte, and he's like, well, when I go to the grocery store, I do the forecast, 10 times.
That's for whatever reason, he's right. It's like for me, it's Costco.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about Costco, but I cannot go in there without stopping in every aisle and having to talk. And most people, they'll get excited. They'll ask you. Then they go, oh, you probably don't. I'm like, no, I love the weather. I want to talk about it. Don't ask me silly things about Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune or something on our station that I have no idea about. Right. If it's weather related, I will talk about it.
Right.
It's the other weird stuff. And people are always amazed that I know, right off the top of my head, what's going on. I said, yeah, this is not just a shtick for me. This is what I live, breathe, and eat this stuff. So I know exactly what's going on.
So Larry said he gets up and leaves for work at 2:30 in the morning. Is that what you do too?
Not me. I have the opposite schedule.
Oh, okay.
So I used to do mornings, and I had to do that when I was in New Orleans, and it was horrible. But I go to work about 2:30 in the afternoon.
Okay.
And then I don't get home until about midnight or 1, depending on.
Gotcha.
But it's all weather dependent. Like I said, if there's bad weather, I've been in there with Larry in the morning, and we've been tag teaming tornadoes. And oftentimes what happens when we know there's a hurricane or a snowstorm, we kind of do 12-hour shifts where like I'll hand it off to Larry at 2 a.m. And then he'll stay and hand it back off to me 2 p.m. the next day. Gotcha. So when we're in like a landfalling tropical system, or we got a big snowstorm, which for our area is like an inch, right? Right. Something like that, then we'll kind of do those 12-hour shifts. So because the thing about weather, it's like, even though we do news, what we do, weather's 24/7. So digitally, socially, apps, you got to have updates all the time. It can't just wait for the 6 and 11 o'clock news, which we don't do anymore. That's a funny thing is people, I always tell people like, oh, I don't watch TV. I said, well, don't worry. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, app, Amazon. I mean, you don't have to watch TV to get my information. Right. In fact, I don't even care if you do, as long as you're getting it from some other source. And that's just the way the industry's changed. And thankfully, I was on the beginning of that, kind of realized that early on that's where it was going, mainly because of my passion for it, and all these digital outlets gave me time to talk and do about things that I couldn't do on TV.
Yeah. Right. I watched a great documentary. I think they made 2 parts of it. In that documentary, they have a ground where all the anchormen and weather people meet from different TV stations.
You thinking of an Anchorman?
And I think that was a fight, wasn't it?
The battle of the station.
The battle of the. Have you done anything like that?
Not like, but it's funny you say that though, because people always think we're like really like rivals,
right?
Because we have the same stuff we go through and the same kind of misery and joys. TV people are pretty close-knit community. Like, we're all friends with people at the other stations, and especially the meteorologists, because there's so few of us.
Right.
So we are all part of organizations where we meet together, we have lunch together, we do social events together. So it's not common for, like, I'm really good friends with Eric Thomas before he retired. I've graduated from TV to real life. But, and Steve Uelson and like, John Aarons, we're all close. We talk a lot because we have similar interests, and we basically are a very close-knit community. So there's more rivalry, I think, between the station managers and like who watches who and stuff. But the people, if you go to like a press conference, you'll see 2 people from different stations helping each other out. Somebody, hey, I'm going to get the audio. Will you record the video? Because it just makes their jobs and lives easier. We're at the same spot, and so they share a lot of information. So it's not as contentious as some people would think in the TV business.
Gotcha. I think I asked Larry this question. I'm going to ask you too. Why do TV stations send a reporter to a live report outside a courthouse when it's already closed about something that happened at 11 o'clock in the morning?
That frustrates me more than anything.
Reporting live to you from the steps of the courthouse. It's like pitch black dark.
There's a dark hole behind you. Like, you could have put them in front of the Kiwa and just throw a building up there. Right. No, there's a lot of weird things that TV, like a lot of managers in TV always had to say, you got to be live. Well, if there's nothing to be live in front of, why are you live? There's no reason for it. The best thing that's happened for us, and it sounds horrible, is the economy and the money. It costs money to do that. We can get the same shot for less money if we record that or do it some other way. So what's happened is that a lot of that's going away just because of the way the economics of broadcasting is going. But when I first started, we would do a lot of silly stuff like that. They tried to cram as many live shots as possible in a show. And they would try to cram as many stories and call everything breaking news, even though it happened 8 hours ago. They just do a lot of silly things because they do research and they find one catchphrase or one thing that works well, and then they just drub it into the ground because they think it's going to work.
That reminds me of a story of, I don't know which local channel it was. I was in Charlotte Airport when it was bad weather, the flights were delayed, and I was watching the TV that was going on. They were showing the news about the weather, and every few minutes or whenever they had the breaks, and they had this local TV station ad for a segment that was coming later on in the evening. One of the local reporter lady, and she kept saying, "I'm going to show you how to save gas, money on gas," like because that's when the gas was like $4 or $5 a gallon.
Yeah.
They keep coming, and then I said, I really wanted to see what is that she's going to show you.
It disappointed you, didn't it?
Disappointed. I wanted to like choke her. So I finally found the TV like that evening, and when the thing came on for the 10 o'clock news, I think 11 o'clock news, again they were like blasting that ad nonstop. Finally she comes on. Again, in the pitch black dark, she's at a gas station. I'm going to show you. You know what she did? She walked to her car, and then she goes, "This is not how you save money on gas." And she takes a left, and then she shows a moped. She goes, "This is what you should be driving." What the heck?
Very useful. Thank you.
And then I bumped into her at Charlotte Airport once, and I really wanted to stop her and ask the question, but she looked like she just got out of bed, so I don't know. So I left her alone.
That back in the day when there was ratings periods in books where like they only did ratings during certain times of year, you'd get those breathless teases and these promotionals and the 5 things that could kill you. We'll show you tonight at 11. Right. It's like, well, I kind of like to know that now. It's like, but they would do that to try to get you to watch, and it always under-delivered because the promotion and the tease was way more dramatic than what the actual story was.
Right.
But that was a gimmicky thing that a lot of TV stations did, and some still do. It was the clickbait of broadcasting is what it was.
Right.
It was to get you to click on the story or watch the story, and then you read it, and you're like, well, that's not what this story's about at all. But they got you there. That's the whole point, you know?
Right. With over 10 years of experience, Express Truck Tax is proud to be the market-leading Form 2290 e-file provider. We offer great support, a free audit check before transmitting, and instant updates on the status of your Schedule 1. Filing is as simple as 1, 2, 3. Just create an account, file your return, and get your Schedule 1. Join the hundreds of thousands of truckers who choose Express Truck Tax year after year. Express Truck Tax, the leading 2290 filing solution for the trucking industry.
Today's bourbon is chicken cock.
So Brad, what we're trying to do is like every commercial, every episode, we try something new or different, and we talk about it a little bit, just a little bit, hoping that they will acknowledge one of those distilleries will acknowledge it. We don't want them to sponsor us or anything. We don't need.
You just want a big package of bottles to show up on the front door.
We just want a case.
That's all you want, right?
We haven't been.
You're talking, Mike. That's what I would want to
get to that. So, do you feel how does that taste?
Oh yeah,
it's good.
I think it's pretty good, pretty smooth.
Good. Yeah.
One of the best tours I've ever been on was the Jack Daniel's distillery. Even if you don't like it, the tour is fascinating, and just the process and it's in a dry county, in Tennessee, which blows your mind,
right?
And so they have strict laws about sampling. Yeah. So the way they get around it is they give you a souvenir bottle. That just happens to be filled with a liquid. So it's fascinating. And then the way they burn the wood, and the thing I thought that was really fascinating too as a meteorologist was, so they have the aging barns, right? They have them spaced out in barns all across the county so that if there's a tornado that hits one of them, it doesn't hit all of them. Or if there's a fire, it doesn't take out all of the barrels, it just takes out one. So they have them separated all over the county. It's really cool.
Are you into bourbon?
A little bit. I'm more of a beer guy. I love craft beer.
Okay,
that's my wheelhouse.
Now is the time
you
for
can just,
that.
Do you have like a favorite spot in Charlotte, or
I'm not sponsored by them or say I do love Noda. I'm like hop, drop, and roll, and like jam session. They just love it. And we talked a little bit about Middle James earlier. Middle James was the closest brewery to my house, so I kind of went there by default, but I was really pleasantly surprised how good their beer is. They do a really good job. Also a big fan of Lower Left Brewing, which is a small boutique brewery. They don't bottle or can anything. It's just a ton. But they have the thing called, it's a great name, Juicy McJuiceface is the name of the beer. It is amazing. It's a great juicy IPA, and it's really, really good.
So most of my friends are now bourbon collectors,
Yeah.
My thing is, I don't care. I'll open any bottle. You come to my house and you point to a bottle saying, "Let's drink that." I'll open it because that's what it's here for. How do you know, or are you a beer collector? Is that a thing called beer collection?
I mean, I like
shelf life.
Yeah,
right?
and I try a lot. One of the things that got me down this path was my wife. When we first met, she worked for a beer and wine distributor in Charlotte, Trian Distributing. And they don't do domestic beer. It was all craft beer and like high-end wines. And so one of the great perks of her job, she didn't even drink beer, which was great for me, by the way. She could go back to the warehouse, and if there was a broken case or six-pack, they would have all these loose bottles, and she could go back there and for basically $1 a six-pack, just fill it with whatever broken leftovers there were. And so I would try everything.
Yeah.
Some of it was horrible. I get what you're saying. Some of these when the high gravity stuff came out, some of these beers tasted like brandy, or they tasted like liquor. And I'm like, that's not the reason I'm drinking a beer. So some of them turned me off right away, but it was nice to try them because they were really expensive and I would never have bought them. So I like sampling a lot, especially local beer. So anywhere I go, I always ask the waiter or waitress, hey, do you have a local brewery? Because I like to try the local stuff. But I do have pretty picky taste. I mean, like there's some things I just can't, like really dark beers and stouts I just can't get into. But I do like good IPA. Like that's not really bitter or hoppy. And that's the fine art of finding an IPA that doesn't taste bitter and nasty. And so when you find one, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And like you drink one and you tell someone it's an IPA and they don't know it's an IPA, that's a good IPA.
But like, the problem with this kind of beers is like you can never remember the name.
Oh, no.
Fucking weird name. And you can never get it again.
No. Well, yeah, that's why the labels are all the key. It's like, I just remember what the label looks like. I have no idea what it was called. It was this colored with this like fish on it or something, But you're right. There's so many different ones. Sometimes these local craft brewers only make small batches, and then it's a great beer, and it's like you never hear from it again. It's like gone. It's like some great item at Costco. It goes away the second you find it.
So you got here on autopilot, is that right?
Part of the
that
way,
thing doesn't work, dude. I paid for that in 2018. That's a lie.
Oh, they fixed it now, right? They fixed it.
Well, I have hardware version too, so I have the nice cameras. No, I was like, I've been looking for a new car for about 9 months, and I knew I was not going to buy an entirely ICE car, internal combustion engine. It was either going to be a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or an EV. And I had actually put an order in for a plug-in hybrid, a Kia Sportage, which was an awesome vehicle, but they are impossible to get. So I'd order from the factory in Korea, and it was a 2-month wait. And during that 2 months, I kept shopping, looking at like maybe there's another car available sooner, because I had sold my car and I was going to be without a car for like a month and a half. And so I started looking around, and Tesla was the first car I looked at because I had rented 2 from Hertz, which is a great way if you're ever interested. Hertz rents them for the same price as a regular car. And so it's a great way.
What does that tell you, Brad?
Saves them money is what it does.
That's what it does.
But it's a great way to try it out, And we actually drove one to Ohio, which was a really true test because now I'm just not commuting. I'm like taking it on a long trip. And I was blown away, first, about how great the drive was. And then second, the supercharging was like a game changer. And that's kind of why I always stuck with Tesla, because their supercharging network is like what sets them apart from everybody else. People will get this fear like, oh, I'm going to be sitting at a charger for 2 hours. I'm like, not with the supercharging. It's just like stopping for a bathroom break, get something to eat, come back, and your car is 80% charged. It's amazing. So the price had come down. I went back and test drove it and just fell in love with it. And I'm like, okay, this is the car I'm getting. So I did lease it this time, though, because technology is changing so quickly with these. I'm like, I'm going to lease it, and then in 3 years the price comes down, new ones come out. I can get my options. But I am a big fan of the EV ecosystem because it is just an amazing setup.
So I was ahead of the game, Brad, here.
Yeah.
I booked it in 2017, waited almost 18 months.
Oh, wow.
To get my Tesla. I was probably one of the first guys here have that.
What model?
Model 3, dual motor, autopilot crap and all that stuff in there. I go to finally the car arrives after delay. I finally go pick up the car in Charlotte, and I sit down, and right where I'm looking out through the windshield, there's like not a crack, but a defect in the windshield.
Oh, man.
So I tell the guy, I said, hey man, look at this thing. It's right where I look out.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this, we are busy. We are like so backed up. So I said, that's not my problem, dude. He goes, well, I can't do anything right now. We'll schedule it, bring it back in a month. I said, sure. Yeah, I was excited about the car, the pickup, and I was like showing it off here, and people want to race at the traffic lights, and I would do all kinds of crap. But then I realized what a bad quality car it is inside. Other than the pickup, couldn't even make a phone call. I don't know the why. You have the why, right? I don't know how. Is it quiet? I have no idea. I haven't been in one. It was horrible. I traded that in for a Ram 1500 Limited, and
that's quite
I
trade, right?
love it.
Yeah,
typically I don't keep a car longer than a year, and this one is coming up to year 5, and I love it.
Oh wow, that's great.
So. I saw your. I realized it was you with your license plate.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, why would anyone get this? But I'm happy that you're enjoying it.
I love it.
Hopefully that liking goes past 6 months.
I'll tell you the funny thing about it is like a lot has changed because the wait was what I was worried about. I put the order in on a Thursday, and they told me maybe a month and a half, which has been a huge deal. It's like that's quicker than it used to be 6, 9, 10, 12 months. And you do everything through the app, which is a weird process. You know, you don't really talk to anybody. It's the app. That afternoon, like a VIN number is assigned to me. The car was literally built that day down in Austin at the Gigafactory, shipped up 2 days later, was in Charlotte, and I picked it up that following Tuesday. So within a week of it being built at the factory in Austin, came to my house. And so that process is kind of cool, and you tell people, it's like, this is the most American-made car you can get. It is in the world. It's 100% American-made, and so that part of it is kind of cool. And then just driving has just been amazing. I've been really happy with it. So
That's
far.
cool.
Yeah,
good stuff. Yeah.
You're fully immersed in the X universe then.
Yeah.
You're also you follow SpaceX. You tweet a lot about different Starlink launches, things like that. And you're an avid tweeter, or Xer.
Yes.
What do you call it? Do you call it X?
I'm going to stick with Twitter for right now. I can't get into the X thing. What a waste of a good brand.
Right. It's so weird to throw it out like that, but yeah.
Without any plan or anything,
Well,
yeah.
I'm sure there's a plan.
But there's a backstory to that.
Yeah.
I just finished reading about it. It's pretty interesting. There's a huge backstory to it.
The execution was poor.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
That is true. But other than, I was going to say, wasting your time on a Tesla, what do you do when you're not talking about weather?
Yeah.
What are your hobbies?
My biggest thing I like doing, obviously with the family, is playing golf. Is probably my biggest passion right now.
Right on.
I didn't start playing golf till I got to college, and I wasn't very good at it. I'm still not great at it, but I love it.
Right.
I was a pretty big athlete in high school and in college. I played 3 sports: basketball, track. I kicked for the football team, played soccer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Soccer was my number 1 sport. I played since I was 6. I played on traveling teams. I became a keeper. So when you become a good keeper, you're very sought after. So I ended up playing on a lot of traveling teams. My last name is Croatian, so I played on a fully Croatian soccer team where I was the only one that spoke English, and got to travel around the world playing club soccer. And so it was funny, when I wanted to be a meteorologist, I gave up a lot of scholarship offers for smaller schools that didn't have a meteorology program, because at the time the MLS was just starting, and I'm like, there's no future in soccer. I knew meteorology was what I was going to do. Little did I know that MLS would be like a viable career path now. And so when I went to Ohio State, I just went there for the degree and ended up walking on the soccer team because I love soccer. And I said, you didn't recruit me, can I walk on? The coach hated me because he's like, I don't accept walk-ons. But again, being a keeper was beneficial here, because I went to tryouts and I was like, oh, you're not bad. We could always use an extra keeper. So played a couple years of soccer, and then quit the varsity team, played club soccer full-time, which was way more fun. Got to travel, still play other schools, but party on the road, which was fun. And we actually went to the national championship in club soccer, which was pretty cool. And then so I played a lot of soccer when I moved to Charlotte too. I would play soccer 5-6 times a week. In between sometimes 6 and 11 o'clock news, I'd go play. This is when I was single. I'd go play a game of soccer, come back to the station and do the 11 o'clock news, flag football. And, so I did a lot of that. And so now for me, it's getting older, slowing down. Golf has become kind of like the thing I like to do. Just like being on the golf course. And then I'm an amateur photographer, a drone pilot. I'm not a great photographer, but I love the technology of digital photography. That's what kind of drew it to me initially, because I love the technology of it and the ability to do what you can. And I don't do portraits and stuff. I do a lot of landscapes. Obviously, when you're a meteorologist, you love taking pictures of the weather, the clouds, sky, and then astrophotography is really, if I had more money to waste, I'd spend it on astrophotography equipment. Which can be really expensive, but I really love
that. Is that like photos of objects in space?
Mostly stuff that you can see right now, but I would love to get like a nice telescope with a DSLR mount where I could track deep space objects, where I can have like 2, 3, 4, 5-minute exposures and take pictures of like nebulas and like galaxies and stuff, where you need to have the telescope track it for a long period of time so you don't get blur, obviously. But that's really expensive, and we got a lot of light pollution here, which doesn't make it the greatest. But I do love taking pictures of the night sky, because it's amazing what you can see with the long exposure, even in the backyard in Charlotte. I will show pictures and they're like, where'd you take that? In my backyard. And they're like blown away with a 300mm lens. It's just, if you know where to point the camera and do the right settings, you can catch a lot of cool things in the sky.
Now, one of the most interesting things that I've seen you post about that you've done is in your backyard, you've created a snow machine
yes.
for the winter. So
yes.
it's just like regular stuff, right? Like
yeah.
It's not like a high-end machine that
no,
you get on
so
a ski
this
slope.
is, so I re-sided my house about 15 years ago. First house me and my wife owned and lived together. I re-sided, I did fiber cement board.
Yeah.
So and it all stems to I had a contractor come out and quote me some crazy price to re-side my house.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's highway robbery. So I started pricing out the materials.
Yeah.
And I could do it for a third of the cost myself. And I'm like, how hard is this to do? So I did what anyone does. I YouTube everything, figure out how to do it. And I'm like, this is not that hard. And so I did fiber cement board. So in that process, I had to buy a big air compressor for the roofing nailer, which was what you use for the siding. It's the same kind of nailer. And so when I was done with that project, I had this air compressor. I'm like, what can I do with this air compressor? It's way too big just to pump up tires. So I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a snowmaker. Because I had this vision, because this is what they do at the ski resorts. They take air and compressed water, and they put it into a nozzle, and they decompress it, and it makes super cool water, and it makes snow. So I came up with the first plan for a T-gun. It looks like the letter T. And you just take a garden hose and air compressor, and it's one nozzle. It's very rudimentary, very simple. And I did that one morning, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning when it was cold enough, stick it on a ladder, and I made snow. And I'm like, this works. So then I'm like, I got to up my game. It's like Tim Allen time. I got to start adding more nozzles, more power. And so then I make a combo gun. It's got 3 nozzles and a nucleation nozzle, and it uses an air compressor and a power washer to up the pressure. And when I started making that, I could make like probably 1.5 feet, 2 feet of snow in a pile that's 10 by 10 in my yard overnight.
Nice.
And the first time I did it in my backyard, I got home from work after the 11 o'clock news, turned it on, and I stayed up all night because you don't want hoses to break or something to go. So I slept on the couch, get up every hour to check it. Next morning, wake up, and there's huge, it was awesome. And I call my neighbors. I'm like, hey, bring your kids over. I got snow in my backyard. They're like, what? They come over, and they're like, oh, my gosh, this is amazing. I had the whole neighborhood in my backyard playing in snow. And it was awesome, and it was so funny. It's the first snow my kids ever saw was man-made snow. It's so much so that when we had our first snow in Charlotte, where it snowed everywhere, my kids were confused. Dad, why is it snowing in other people's yards now? He had no idea this happened like from Mother Nature.
To introduce them to an Ohio winter.
Yeah. So to me, it's the science of it's cool, the technology of it's cool, and then the meteorology part of it. So it's like it takes all the interest I have and like combines it into one thing. But it's essentially what ski resorts do. They do it on a much larger scale. I just do it in a backyard, and you can buy the stuff pre-made, but I did it all with plumbing parts from like Lowe's and Home Depot, and the Tractor Supply store for the nozzles. So
none of this is a side effect of drinking so much vegetable juice. No. $8 a bottle.
No. Though it does help. It does help. Makes the night go by quicker. Because you just stare at this for hours and hours and hours, you know. But it's pretty cool. It's like I've done it one year right around Christmas. It got cold enough, and it was so cool to be able to do it at Christmas.
Right on.
Cool. And so that was fun. And people ask me like, "Can you do it at my house?" I'm like, "Well, here's the thing. You still need it. It still needs to be cold enough. So it's like I still need some help from Mother Nature. People think it's just like a machine that makes it. No, it's like it needs to be cold enough outside. Right. So I just can't do it on demand. I need some help from Mother Nature.
I just saw a clip of some comedian on it. It just came as an ad. Most TV stations are not necessarily even the news. It's more partisan depending on which side of the politics they go in. And they said, how come the weather guys are not like that? What if it was a right-wing weather guy? How would we say the weather? What if it's a left-wing? I don't know the name of the comedian. I just saw a clip. But he started off good, but then he wandered off into,
I think you would see it play out in the climate change arguments.
Yeah. And people, sometimes people think that's how it is political. But the thing is, and the reason it doesn't happen is, we're data people. Like to me, when people say it's a cold or hot day, I said, I don't really think it's hot and cold until I look at the numbers. And I always compare it to what is our average. So everybody has personal preferences. We joked about so many people from Ohio here. Well, to them, this could be hot or this could be cold. We're not all from here. So we don't know what's normal for here. Right. So I base everything on what is normal for Charlotte, North Carolina, not for what I think is hot or cold. It's for what's hot and cold for Charlotte. And so what a lot of people do is they use their personal preference instead of what's the climatological average for this area. So I tell my staff that too. I said, if you want to say hot, cold, warm, dry, compare it to what is average for here, not what you feel it is.
Right.
So I think that's what it comes down to. We like to stick to the numbers.
Yeah, that's interesting because as a weather person, you've got to look at every developing situation as it's a new event, but you've also got to keep in mind the patterns and typical norms of the area.
Absolutely. The thing about forecasting the future is understanding the past.
Right.
Like the way you know something's anomalous or it's out of the ordinary is by knowing what's happened in the past and how crazy or out of whack it is. And that's why I think most meteorologists know climate change is a big issue, because when you do weather for as many years as I've done it, you just see things happening different. Like one of the biggest calling cards for me is not just warmer temperatures, but something we look at called precipitable water. Precipitable water is this term we use for how much moisture is in the whole column of the atmosphere. So it's imagine having a sponge. It's like if your sponge is all the way filled up and you squeeze it out and you get so much water. Well, normally a wet day for us, like a heavy rainfall, the precipitable water would be like 2 inches. Now we're seeing like 3.5, 4 inch numbers that I have never seen ever, in my entire career. And to get that, the air has to be warmer to hold that moisture. So you just see events like that, this isn't something that's happened in our area before. And so something's changing. And as a meteorologist, for us, we could talk about the reason for that. It almost doesn't matter because it affects our forecast. So just like I have to take El Nino and La Nina into effect, into effect of like how it's going to impact our forecast. If the climate is warming, I don't care why it's warming. I just know it is. It's going to affect my forecast. I need to adjust for it. Well, So, and that's why as a scientist, it's like we don't get caught up in the policy or the reason all the time. I can show you some of the reasons why, and we know for a pretty good reason. It's 90-80% human cause, if not higher. But whatever the reason, it doesn't matter because it's affecting the way I have to forecast the weather. So I have to adjust. And that's what you do as a scientist. If someone says, these things are impacting your job, you're going to use them to make a better forecast. And that's what we're doing.
So when I fly, obviously I'm looking at the weather. I fly from Rock Hill directly to Akron Fulton now. And obviously I'm looking at the weather report, but we have so many apps and tools. I don't really sit there and like when I went to pilot school, we had to sit there and read the maps. Obviously on a day-to-day, I don't do all this stuff. I just look at it, tells me the wind direction, headwind, all that stuff. Have you seen a lot more tools that has helped you with your profession, which has that made you not go back to basics at all?
Ooh, it's a good question. I mean, that's the thing I love about my job in some instances, that it changes all the time. The technology, the information, it's always changing. So you never stop learning. I probably have learned more in the last 5 years than I did in the previous 10 years because of just how quickly things are changing. But what happens, a lot of the new information and technology, it's making my job easier. It's the mundane task I don't have to spend time on. So people always ask, how's AI or anything going to affect my job? It is affecting my job, but it's making my job easier because I can spend my human effort on things that matter more than the mundane stuff that I don't need to spend time on. And one of the things that we do is, so you probably aren't familiar, or we're probably familiar with this. You ever skew T log P diagram, which is a sounding. It's a profile of the atmosphere. Well, when I was in school, we had to hand draw these things. Okay, the weather balloon goes from the ground up to the top of the atmosphere. You had to hand plot it and calculate everything. Well, now if I can let a computer and AI do that, or even forecast or animate it out into the future, boy, that's a ton of that's a ton of time saved that I don't have to use, and I can spend on actual forecasting. So for my job, it's made things a lot easier. But in some ways, there's so much information. Boy, it's almost drowning. You almost have to you have to like start putting blinders on because you can literally get paralyzed by too much information.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And I think that's what happens with apps. There's so much weather data out there. And nobody really takes a second to go, is that good data or bad data? They just know it's data. And they look at it. And for me, that's the frustrating part because it's not all equal. It's like fast food and like a sit-down restaurant. It's still food, but they're not the same. Okay, one has got a lot more care and taken into it. One is just quick.
It's great to see the passion that you have for what you do. I mean, even when we were talking to Larry, it was the same thing. But on that note, what is your thought on having to put on makeup every afternoon?
Oh, I hate it. I hate it.
Do you do it yourself or yourself?
Oh yeah, myself. I remember when I took that job in Dayton. when someone said, you got to go get makeup, I'm like, what do you mean makeup? They're like, oh yeah, I got to wear makeup. So like, well, how do I don't know what to do. It's like, go to the makeup counter at the mall. That was the scariest thing I've ever done. So I walk up to the makeup counter at the mall and I'm like, okay, I need this I'm going to be in broadcasting. And the guy was like, sure, yeah. I'm like, no, I swear I'm going to be on TV and I need help. Like, what color should I get? And he was nice and everything, but I don't think he was taking me seriously. Like, yeah, you're just wearing makeup to wear makeup, aren't you? Sure. I'm like, no, this is for a job. I swear. This is why I can. But I hate it because, the worst thing is not putting it on. It's forgetting to take it off when you walk out of there. And then someone sees you and you're like, what is on your face? and I'm like, oh no, I forgot to take my makeup. So I have like makeup removal things, or it gets on your shirt, or just, that's the thing I hate. It's like, I just don't like wearing it, but it's part of the job. It's I hate it.
So has that changed? I don't know. Is your TV station HD or 4K?
Well, so it's interesting. Like, at first, when we went HD, everybody was freaking out because you had to get different makeup. Because now it's like you got to get HD makeup because it's like thicker. But now what's interesting, and talk about technology, we had these Sony cameras for a while that had like a built-in like skin softening filter in them. So just like on your phone, a lot of these filters, that you could build those into the cameras now so that you could soften and put like fake makeup on the anchors. And it's like, and we actually for a while had them, and it was kind of a cool feature, but they went away because we changed camera manufacturers. But I'm like, at some point I think it's going to come back, because then that's like, why have everyone wear makeup? Why don't we just put like a filtering that makes everyone look like they have makeup on? Because the biggest thing you have to do is even your skin tone out, and because there's so much light on you, it's like powder, so you're not shiny and like glaring. That's 90% of what the men do. The women have it way worse. Women in our business, they get ridiculed for wearing the same thing within 30 days. Like, what kind of makeup? And the women on women is the worst part of it. They're the ones that are the most critical. And sometimes I want to say, are you even listening to what the person's saying or doing? Who cares what they're wearing? Do you go to your doctor's office and go, what are you wearing? No, you want them to get you better. Who cares what they're wearing?
Do you have any final thoughts? Any final items to promote? Anything upcoming?
Man,
we have a huge viewership. We can promote whatever you want.
No, I'm trying to think what I have coming up. Not much. Probably the biggest thing I have coming up, which is I geeked out about, is I got invited to speak at Grandfather Mountain. So they have a speaker series, and they invited me to go up there in September. And so I'll be up there. I want to say it's the third week in September. I should know the date off the top of my head. I know it's when I get back from my weather conference, but it's a really cool event. If you're a VIP member of Grandfather Mountain, you can go and like mingle with us beforehand, and then I'm get to speak. And so they've had some Ginger Z was up there last summer speaking. So it's kind of a cool thing to be invited to go speak. It's such a great venue. And I'm going to talk about how the mountains of North Carolina affect our weather in more ways than one. So it's a pretty great topic. So that's the biggest thing I have coming up right now.
So what's the average age of the people who are coming to listen to this?
Probably going to be pretty old, because it's...
I mean, is this a regular thing? Or is it
so like the Friends of Grandfather Mountain is actually it's a for-profit organization, so you have to pay to get in. And so they have like donors, and they have like members that you basically buy a membership, and you get a free pass to Grandfather Mountain, and then you get this speaker series, and helps them build like new facilities. Because if you've never been up there, it's a beautiful mountain. They've got Mile High Bridge, and they got a little mini zoo up there. They got animals. And they have this brand new nature center, which is really cool, which is where I'll be speaking, which I'm excited about. So it'll probably be locals, but then some people will drive in that are members. Like, I'm a member. I drive up there probably 2 or 3 times a summer with the kids, and we hang out up there.
Very cool.
So it'll be a great event. I'm looking forward to that.
I know you worked with Larry Sprinkle pretty close, like for a long time.
For a long time, 20 years, and he's been there 7 years.
Is that real hair?
I don't know, man. It's amazing. I've only seen it move once, and I think it was because it was raining. But I'll tell you a funny story about working with Larry. Larry is like the most genuine person you'll ever be around. Right. He's also a amazing prankster. So like he used to do this thing, and he still does it, where any new employee he'll crank call them. Well, in this day and age, it's hard to crank call people with caller ID.
Right.
And so he got me good when I first came to the station. I had just did my first weekend on air. So people don't realize I started weekends. I did the whole weekend. I did the morning show, the evening show, then the next morning, and then the evening show. So I did like 4 shifts, and then I was off for 3 days. Yeah. So Monday morning, it's like 8 o'clock, so I'm exhausted. I just worked that shift. I didn't have a landline, so my cell phone rings. I look, and it's the station. I'm like, why is the station calling me? I'm just started, so I'm like, I better answer this. I pick it up, and it's this old lady. She said, Mr. Panovich, I'm in the lobby. You're supposed to be at my Rotary meeting talking to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the station signed me up for a speaking engagement I didn't know about. So I'm like, oh ma'am, I'm so sorry. I'm like trying to shave. I'm cutting myself. I'm like, oh ma'am, I'll be there. I'm on my way. And she's like, I came to the station looking for you. And I'm like, oh my, and so I'm freaking out. And then I'm like running, putting my pants. I got like one leg of my pants on, and I got the phone in my ear, and I hear this chuckle. I'm like, Larry? Is that you? It was Larry. He like crank called me, and he knew to call from the station lobby, so it would look like this person had come to the lobby looking for me, and then used the phone to call my number. I freaked out. I had a heart attack because I'm like, I just moved here. I just got this job. They probably told me I was supposed to do this, and I totally forgot about it. And so he does that to everybody. He called one of our anchors or reporters that was new. They were pregnant with their first child. And he called her desk saying that she had won this diaper changing service where the person comes into your house and changes the diaper of the baby. And she was like, wait, so like in the middle of the night, it's like, oh yeah, ma'am, don't worry. We've got security protocols. And she was all into this like, so you're going to come in and change my baby's diaper anytime? Oh yes, ma'am. It's we've got a long track record. We got references. She was buying it hook, line, and sinker. And then finally Larry started, it's Larry. And she's like, oh, she started laughing. I'm like, I cannot believe she fell for that. And then in his radio days, he used to call people in his office on the speakerphone. Yeah. He'd call into these DJs on the radio and pretend he was a crazy listener. And he'd know all this backstory about the DJ, and they would be like, "Wait, how did you know this?" Because he can do voices so well.
He's great with the voices.
People don't realize this. I don't know if he talked about his job when he did the Morning Zoo here.
We talked a little bit about it.
People thought there was 4 people on that show. Oh. It wasn't. It was him doing 4 characters. Yeah. And people were like, "Hey, where's so and so?" Like, no, that was me. He was and he is so talented at that. But that is, and he's like that every day at work. Oh, he is just such a fun person to be around.
Right on. That's awesome.
He works way too hard too. If I was his age, I'd be retired.
We had a great time talking to him.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming by. It's been a real pleasure.
Awesome.
My pleasure, guys. This is great.
Thank you.
The Bandit Room is a production of Span Enterprises, located in sunny Rock Hill, South Carolina. We've been developing, supporting, and growing successful IRS e-filing and business management solutions since 2010. Go to spanenterprises.com now to learn more. The views and opinions expressed in the Bandit Room are those of the guests, and do not necessarily reflect or state the opinions of Span Enterprises. No information should be considered as tax, legal, or other professional advice.